In this lesson, we will take a look at how to create a crosstab query. We'll start by creating a simple select query, and then from there we'll turn it into a totals query, work on it a little more, and then finally convert it into a crosstab query. I find that working with this little bits at a time, working your way up, is the easiest way to create a crosstab query. I'll start by coming up to Query Design, and using the Northwind database, what I'd like to do is calculate and display the sales for all of my employees for a particular year based on a given supplier, and then maybe also by category. So for instance, I'd like to show a given employee, and for a given year I'd like to come back and show the total sales for that given year by a given supplier. So I'll start by adding a few tables. We're going to need my employees table, of course, and then I'll have to pull in orders, order details, and then I don't need the products table. Actually, I will need the products table because I need to get to the categories table, and I also need to get to my suppliers table. I'll go ahead and click close there. I'll bring in suppliers and pull it over here. Alright, I'll just try to make some arrangements here so you can see all of my tables and how they're related together. So one employee can take orders from several customers. On those orders we have the particulars about the quantity and the price for a given product. On that order we have suppliers that supply the products, and we have each product grouped into categories. I'll bring in the employee last name. I'll bring in the order date. We'll also bring in the unit price and the quantity. I'll pull in the company name for the supplier, and we'll run our data set to see what we get. And as it turns out, I get a whole mess of information, including 2,155 records. We're going to condense this down and group this together into something that we can read and make sense of. The first thing I'd like to do is to take this order date and convert it into a year to only display the year and not the rest of the date. And then for the unit price and quantity, I want to combine these together, multiply them, and come up with a total sale. Move to Design View, and then for the order date, what I'm going to do is click inside of here, and I'm just going to take this out, right click and choose Build to build this out using the expression build. I'll first type in a name, so I'm going to go ahead and call this year, and then I'm going to come out to my functions, and in my built-in functions I'm going to go find my date and time functions. At the bottom of the list here there is something called a year, and the year is going to go ahead and look for a date field, so I'm going to go ahead and plug that in. I'm going to get rid of this little extra expression that they give us, highlight date, and now I'm going to come back to my database, and under tables I'm going to find my orders table, and then just like before I'm going to look for that order date and plug that in to the function, which will just pull out the year from this date. I'll go ahead and click OK, and now I have that included here. If I take a look at this by running it, I can see that now I just display the year and not the full date. Back in Design View. Next, I want to combine the unit price and the quantity. Several different ways to do this, but I'm just going to go ahead and delete both of these and come out to a brand new field, right click and choose Build again, and then I'm going to come out and give this a name. I'll call this Total Sales, and then I'm just going to come out to my database tables, and under the order details I'm going to go ahead and take the unit price and multiply that by the quantity. I want to get rid of that little extra expression, bit of nonsense it puts in there, and I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now it looks like I have this calculation created out here. I'm going to go ahead and move this back where it was before. I'm going to select it, just move it back to the right side of year. And when I run my query, I go ahead and see that I get the total sales for a particular year for a particular employee by a given supplier. Now I see my last name repeated several times. I see the years again repeated over and over, and also the company names appear to be repeated over and over. So I can condense this down even a little more. Going back to design view, I could turn on my totals tool up here at the top, and I could group by the last name, group by the year, group by the company name, and then under total sales, what I'm going to want to do here is sum these up as they go along. And then let's run this again and see what we get. First of all, I started out with 2,155 records, and now I'm all the way down to 629 records. But I can see I'm grouping everything nicely together here and summing up. So I'm just seeing Buchanan for the year 1996. We have a total sales for the company name supplier given out here. Now if I scroll down, I can see that eventually after I get through all of my suppliers, I have 28 suppliers. I will eventually come back to my next salesperson, which is Callahan, and then we'll go ahead and group those guys together as well. Let's see if we can't cross-tabulate this. What I'd like to do is have, instead of this all listed along the top in columns, I'd like to go ahead and have things listed by rows and then column labels along the top. We can do this with a crosstab query. I'll go back in design view, and what I will do from here is click on my crosstab tool, and then I get a new crosstab row down here at the bottom. Now the crosstab requires you to have at least one set of row headings, one set of column headings, and also a value that you're going to display as a cross-reference between the rows and the columns. So I'm going to go ahead and say I'm going to make my last name a row heading. I'm going to include the year there as a row heading. And then the company name, I'm going to have that listed along the top as a column heading. And the total sales, I'm going to come down here and make this a value. That's going to be plugged in as a cross-reference between the rows and the columns. And when I come back and run this again, now I'm able to see my information listed by employee out here for a given year. So I see Buchanan out here, and I see 1996, 97, 98, and for each supplier I can see how much they have sold for a given supplier for a given year. Let's check this out by category. I'll go back into design view, and then instead of suppliers table, I'm going to come back out and change this to the categories table, and I'm going to choose a category name instead. And we're going to go ahead and still group by this as a column heading. And when I run this, essentially I'm seeing the same thing, but now it's coming out and just displaying them all by the category that a given product is fallen into, and not just the product sold by a supplier. So I can see that Buchanan for 1996 has sold $9,498 in beverages and $98 in grains and cereals. And likewise, I can do this all the way down for each one of my employees. I end up with 27 records because in my data set I have 3 different years and I have 9 different employees. So 9 times 3 is 27, each employee by each year. The only way I wouldn't see this is if we had an employee that didn't make any sales at all for any given year, and then that employee, that row for that year for that employee would drop off and I'd end up with, say, 26. But that's basically the simple set of a crosstab query. If it looks a lot like a pivot table, that's because it really is. We've gone ahead and did a little pivoting by changing suppliers to category. If you were working with this quite a bit, you'd probably want to use a pivot table report and not just a crosstab. But for a datasheet type display, maybe inside of a subform or something, this might work out for you just as well.